my rotation 411 astrology initiates. I'm not sure why this is so dark. It seems extra dark today. There we go. It's a little better. Okay. My eyes are a little foggy, so maybe that's why. All right. So I'll say it again because sometimes there's a little pause. Welcome all my rotation 411 initiates. Today we're going to wrap up lecture 3 in the book, The Outer Planets and Their Cycles. The link for the playlist is in the description box below if you find yourself wanting to see the previous videos. Again, I'm not sure why. Like the light is, my eyes are, the light is extra dim today. Maybe I'm going to need a new bulb soon. Anyways, so yeah, I'm just going, sometimes the focus, where's that? See if that helps. Oh, that, I don't know. Anyways, so we're just going to zip through this. I'm going to try not to ad-lib and talk too much so we can get on to lecture 4 probably Monday, but if I can get on over the weekend, I will. So we left off yesterday with talking about Freud and Carl Jung's birth charts, and you know, I do have insights at 3 in the morning about what I want to sort of add to what we were reading. There was even something else I had said yesterday that I was like, oh, I kind of want to say something about, but now I'm just trying to get on here and get us through lecture 3. So if it comes back to me, it comes back to me. So basically the audience is asking Liz Green, are you saying that the two points of view are completely incompatible? And we're talking again about Freud and Jung's views on astrology. And if you want to hear more about what we were talking about in regards to this previously, the link for the playlist is in the description box, and I'll pin it in the comments in the playback, and you can go to lecture 3 part 4. I believe this is part 5. This is the most parts we've done in a lecture, so we're going to wrap it up today. Also, if you're looking for your perfect astrological match or you're dating online at all, be sure to check out moonmatch.love and enter the database. You can use my coupon code rotation411, but for the end of the year, if you're watching, if you're watching this after December 2024, be sure to use my coupon code. But for the end of the year, they are doing a great special where you get 50% off. So you can enter in auto search and see if you have any matches for about $7. So that's a pretty good deal. All right. Anyways, she's saying, are you saying the two viewpoints are incompatible when it comes to Freud and Jung's views on astrology? And Liz says, no, I'm not saying that at all, but I think it's difficult to find the place where they meet. The experience of Neptune's world defies the intellect. It's terribly difficult to communicate, let alone justify with any kind of logical system. But a purely Neptunian mysticism without any grounding in the laws of reality is worse than useless, because it can delude the person into believing that his vision is greater than reality. One without the other is incomplete. I think we need both points of view, but they are hard to put together because we tend to favor one or the other. It seems that this kind of pairing of opposites is a basic propensity in human beings. The conscious attitude takes one side and the unconscious takes the other and starts tugging. When a person... Hi, Mike Jones. Have you ever heard of the rapper, or are you the rapper? He was performing on my 18th birthday. I got to see Mike Jones live. That was pretty fun. Anyways, so the conscious attitude takes one side and the unconscious takes the other and starts tugging. When a person tries terribly hard to explain everything from a rational basis, that is when he is in most danger of becoming irrational in his obsession with rationality. The moment he tries to disassociate himself from the evidence of his senses and the facts of the world around him, that is when he is in most danger of becoming hyper-rational in his attempts to control his reality, which you can't do with Neptune, right? Hi, Esperma. Hi, Brazil. Who? Mike Jones. Yeah, you know. All right. Back then, they didn't want me. So I just kidding. Okay. The moment he tries to disassociate himself from the evidence of his senses and the facts of the world around him, that is when he is in most danger of becoming hyper-rational. That was kind of a mouthful, in his attempts to control his reality. Nietzsche, which I said yesterday, I'm like, oh, I saw Nietzsche down here. Hi, you guys, I told you my eyes are kind of foggy today. Hi, BTA. Oh, Blake. Hi, Blake. Blake, we're reading The Outer Planets and Their Cycles. It's an astrology book about the outer planets, the generational planets, Neptune, Saturn, Pluto. Hi, Lucky. Okay, so Nietzsche, who was like great artist and philosopher type. I can't remember his exact titles, but he wrote about the opposing viewpoints of the Apollonian and the oh gosh, I should know. The Apollonian and the Dionysian, which have a tendency to switch places if they are pushed too far. I think she'll elaborate on what those are. I think they're different empires or schools of thought. Like the Apollonian she's referred to before, that's like before Hermeticism, and the Dionysian is another era of thought. So hopefully she'll kind of review with us what those are. Okay, cool. I'm glad, Blake. All right. This is largely why I'm a little cynical about ideologies and polarized political viewpoints. The further you take the right or the left, the more they become like each other. They become e- uh, each other. Hitler and Stalin are interchangeable. I think a good example of this is in the tract that was published, The Humanist. That's the title of a book, The Humanist, a while ago by a number of scientists against astrology. So I told you guys, and I'm trying not to take off too much because we want to finish this today. When I was in college, I did Astronomy 101 and Psychology 101. And someone who had gone before me said in their psychology class, their psychology professor said, if you don't know anything about about astrology, then you know nothing about psychology. But when I got there, both courses had a page discrediting astrology. And I'm like, well, if it's so, unnoteworthy, then why did you need to write a page about it in your book? Disputing its validity. Yes, yes, I am. Oh, lucky, I'm reading a book about the outer planets. So in astrology, we have the personal planets. If you look at your birth chart, I need to have a birth chart just up and ready for an example for you guys. But your sun sign is the day of your birth. So that's your sun sign. But then the day you were born, Mercury and Venus and Mars and Saturn and Pluto, they were all in different signs. So we call the slow moving planets, the outer planets, generational planets, because they move through signs very slowly. So people who are born within 2 to 10 years of you are going to share your Saturn or your Pluto with you. And so this book is sort of exploring what exactly that means in depth. Anyways, okay. If you want to look up what your planets are and have me go over personally with you, what each one means for you, you can always get a reading from me at rotation411.com. I have some great birth chart packages. I have great romance astrology. That's what I actually specialize in, is I'm really good at compatibility. It's called synastry. And then I also have tarot readings over there as well. And if you subscribe to the channel, every once in a while I kick out some general tarot readings. Blake, we are on page 73, and this has 7 lectures in it. We're finishing up lecture 3 today, and this book is on Amazon. Brand new, it's $150, but I think paperback is about $80, so it's quite pricey. So we're doing it as a book study here, and it's written by Liz Green. It's from a series of lectures she did in 1980, and she wrote the book following up in 1982. But she is the actual astrologist on astro.com. She did a whole computer programming thing to write horoscopes on there, so it's a good place if you want to look up your horoscope. And also, I have my own astrology website called divinetimedatabase.com. That's where I write the definitions for, you can run like your compatibility and stuff. It's pretty cool. And if you go to divinetimedatabase.org, that's the astrology dating app that I helped develop with a team, and you can look and see if you have any perfect astrological matches on there. So if you are dating online, I do recommend you get in there. This month there's a 50% off special. And by now we have enough people in there that most of you are going to have at least one match the first time that you enter and run. Oh, thank you. I appreciate it, Trev. All right. Okay, so getting back into reading here. Yeah, but if you use the coupon code this month the shortcut to get there is moonmatch.love. So if you just like open your browser and type that in, and they just updated, or I think it'll be published in a few days, they're updating the Android app, but the Apple app will be coming out, but the browser works just as well. I like the browser. So I am not from Brazil. I'm from the west coast of the United States. But I said hi to Brazil because one of you said hi from Brazil. Who was it? One of you said hi from Brazil. Esperma Gameplays said hi from Brazil. Okay, so back to the book. The Humanist, okay, this was about a bunch of scientists writing against astrology. And my thing is, like, if it's so incredible, why do you need to push against it? Like, just let it be tabloid fodder. You know what I mean? But anyways, because it's definitely a threat to the establishment, right? Probably most of you have seen it or heard of it. No, we haven't. We haven't heard of the humanist because this came out in the 80s, but it was an attempt to debunk astrology in the name of science. It was so emotional and irrational that it made me fall about laughing. Although it was, maybe we're going to do a couple more books. We're going to do A Hero with a Thousand Faces, which is all about symbolism. We're going to read over Joseph Campbell's book. And then there's one other astrology book I wanted to do, but we might have to, and there's a couple of Carl Jung articles I want to read about astrology on here with you guys as well. But we might have to pull out this humanist book and see what she's laughing about. So, but this is very common. I think the only place of sanity is somewhere in the middle. Okay. Oh, wait. So let me back up. I skipped a sentence here. She says, it was an attempt to debunk astrology in the name of science. It was so emotional and irrational that it made me fall about laughing. Although it was attempting to say that those who believe in astrology are emotional and irrational people. But this is very common. I think the only place of sanity is somewhere in the middle, giving respect to both worlds. I'm kind of from all over the West Coast, Lucky. I've been to Seattle, Los Angeles, all over. Audience, it is likely that people have contacts between... Okay, so the audience is now asking her, it is likely that people who have contacts between an inner planet, that would be like Venus and Mars and Mercury, and both Uranus and Neptune, are going to feel compelled to choose between them. Liz says, yes, I think this is what happened to Lenin. That was, again, some... I don't know who Lenin is. I should have Googled it. So when we start lecture 4, I'll Google who he is. But you guys, some of you will know who it is who know history better than I do. I just learn history as I go. Nikolai Lenin, who was born in Russia. So he must have been some kind of... I mean, see if I have any battery left on my iPad. We can look him up really quick. But I do want to get through this today. But I'm curious now, so I'm going to look him up real quick. So really quick, I'll show you guys too. If you go to divine-timing-database.com/stars and put in birth dates, you can see, what I write about your compatibility based on my experience, and you can kind of see whether you're meant to be with someone or not. Nikolai Lenin. So we've gone over Hitler's birth chart. She did mention John Lennon, so I was talking about music. Nikolai Lenin. So there's a Vladimir Lenin. The Vladimir Lenin was the founder of the Russian Communist Party, but Nikolai Lenin, he was an active revolutionist through the spiritual motives that have moved all great reformers. He has a statue. It's kind of funny. So, seems he led the Russian Revolution, but I'm not quite sure what against. Maybe the Bolsheviks? I'll have to research it a little more because it's not giving me a brief answer. Okay. So I don't think he was a dictator. I think he was a revolutionist because he was he also, I think, was a socialist, from what we were reading yesterday, because she says how Lenin viewed Marx, and Karl Marx was a communist. So I think Lenin might have been one of the first to try to implement communism, and it kind of became socialism, if I remember my history at all correctly. But if I'm wrong, feel free to correct me in the comments, because I know some of you out there are history buffs and will rip that apart or confirm it and go, yeah, you're close, but all right. Yes, I think it is what happened to Lenin. Uranus and Neptune are in square, and with a square, the tendency is to side with one end and project the other one. The rejected end of the square becomes the enemy outside. I think something similar would have happened if it had had the sun conjuncting one and square the other. It is very useful if you have these strong outer planet contacts in the chart, especially if two contradictory ones, such as Uranus and Neptune, are involved, to consider what sort of ideologies or collectives you like and dislike intensely. It's an excellent exercise. So she's saying, if you look at your birth chart and you see a square to an outer planet, Saturn, I consider Saturn an outer planet. She's not exactly calling it that here. She's kind of treating it as a mid planet. But she does refer to Saturn a lot. So she's counting Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto as the outer planets, and even Chiron to an extent, which we now consider firmly an asteroid, and we don't consider Pluto a planet as of right now again. But anyways, so if you look at your birth chart and you see that you have squares with any of these planets, you might want to look at really what your society believes and how you align with that, and if it's really true or not, or if you've just been conditioned to believe it. But anyways, I know that was kind of wordy, so some of you left, but all right. It's an excellent exercise. Do you despise socialism? Do you loathe capitalism? Do you hate wealthy businessmen? Do you idolize the unions? Do you have a horror of religious people? Do you think the peace movement can do no wrong and the police no right? It's very revealing to reflect on one's strong collective antagonisms and idealizations. You'll often find outer planets involved in squares and oppositions to inner ones with very strong or obsessive likes and dislikes in this kind of direction. So if your sun is squaring Neptune, you might really not like spirituality, or you might become completely obsessed with it where you lose your own identity in it. Um, Okay. And actually, Carl Jung and I have a wide orb, but we both have our sun square Neptune. And the thing we would have in common is like we like psychology, but we also like astrology because Neptune would be astrology and the sun would represent more a person's personality. So, trying to make sense of the two. Oh, thank you, Methane Bomb. I feel like your name makes you sound a little crazy. All right. Anyways. It's probably because my eyes are foggy today and I'm looking all over the place and not directly into the lens, but who knows? Anyways, uh, okay, you often find outer planets involved in squares and oppositions to inner ones with very strong or obsessive likes and dislikes in this kind of direction. Very often, very often, Saturn gets cast as the arch conservative and Pluto as the fascist. Uranus will wear the face of the revolutionary and Neptune the peace-loving utopian dreamer. I have noticed a typical pattern with Pluto squares and oppositions to the Sun. These people often complain of others who come in their lives and dominate or manipulate them. They are often very liberal themselves and have a horror or loathing of anything powerful or ruthless. Could be a boundary thing. So if you have Pluto square opposition the Sun in your chart, you may really actually have to, learn about boundaries and establishing them. Okay, yet they are carrying this propensity in themselves. I was very interested in the way in which Jimmy Carter, who has a Sun Pluto square, got himself tangled up with a dictator like Khomeini. I hope I'm saying that right. It's spelled Khomeini. In, uh, in some way, there was a strange fate about the collision. My fantasy is that Khomeini acted out Carter's Pluto. Carter was the reasonable Libran trying to be fair and cooperative. His own unlived strength and ruthlessness materialized for him in the world. And then it has a little asterisk here and it says, another good example more recently is Mrs. Thatcher, who is also a Libran with Sun in square to Pluto, and whose entanglement with the Argentinian junta has a similar fatedness about it. Again, I'm not a big history buff, but if any of you know about that, we could look more into it if you want with Google. All right, audience, can you talk about the Uranus-Pluto conjunction in Virgo? Liz, yes, certainly. Hold on, I'm going to take a little sip before we get totally into that. But I think, oh, yeah, we only have about 3 more pages here for lecture 3. I'm trying to finish it up today, so kind of, usually I stop and elaborate a little more, but we're going to speed through this. But if you want to watch the previous videos, the playlist is in the description below. It's the first link. All right. Yes, certainly. That conjunction was operative from around 1963 to 1968. It's interesting because I do feel like those parents of like my generation born in the mid 1960s are definitely very unique. The ones a little younger than the baby boomers. So for a period of time during those 5 years between the spring of 1964 through the end of 1966, Saturn was hovering around in opposition to the conjunction. Another thing too about that is there's somebody I keep coming across who's really famous, and I didn't think he was that much older, but he was born in 1965. Like, I think Dr. Dre is born in 1965. There's a few people I didn't think were that old. Well, now I guess they're getting older, but anyways. Saturn was hovering around in opposition to the conjunction. Uranus, together with Pluto, suggests to me a political vision coupled with an urgent need to destroy old forms and attitudes. It's obviously rather obsessive and potentially violent. The keynote with Neptune, which, if you remember, was coupled with Pluto in Hitler's chart, is salvation for divine ends. But the keynote with Uranus is freedom from constraint. And if you put this with Pluto's urgent emotional necessity, then the seeking of that freedom isn't likely to be particularly gentle, right? Because Pluto rules the eighth house, the tower in the tarot, which is death and rebirth, the phoenix rising from the ashes. So the tower happens quickly. Like if you have a breakup or divorce, it's a very quick energy the tower can represent, and then you have to rebuild a new foundation. So if Pluto's involved, there's not a lot of patience. It's like, nope, we have to completely start over from scratch, tear everything down. We're starting over. This structure is dilapidated. Okay. um I am better versed. It's like bringing a wrecking ball in. I am better versed with what was happening in America during that time than I am with what was happening in Great Britain, because she was born in Great Britain, because I was living in America then. Of course, my perceptions and memories are subjective ones, but they might point in a particular direction. One of the major events that occurred under the conjunction was the Vietnam War. I don't think the war itself is necessarily typical of the conjunction, since we tend to have wars going on all the time, and just about any heavy configuration appears to set them off. But the repercussions of that war are very important. There was a tremendous rebellion against it, of a unique kind. I think the general attitude in the two world wars was that it was noble to fight for your country because that was what you were brought up to believe. If you were conscripted, then you went to war, and you didn't question the rightness of it. I think conscripted would mean drafted, but okay. But people didn't react in that way to Vietnam. The unquestioned acceptance of authority broke down. The 60s, of course, saw the birth of the drug and dropout generation, the great hippie movement. The things which were attacked were typically Virgoan, meaning like Virgo, Virgoian, Virgonian. Okay. Ordinary 9 to 5 jobs, humdrum worldly existence, unquestioned obedience to the system, petty materialism, preoccupation with order, and conventional morality. So Virgo is, daily tasks. So it's a habit or routine. That's why she's saying ordinary 9 to 5s, anything tedious. I have a Virgo moon. I like that stuff. So I'm not saying it in a bad way, but this is what Virgo represents. Okay. And also petty materialism can be like, we can, different Virgo, sun or moon in our own ways can be a little bit into knickknacks, or they're not necessarily hoarders, but they definitely, like their little material items, and can even be, I have a friend who's a Virgo sun. He's like OCD, keeps everything in perfect order. Other Virgos I know are a little bit more all over the place, but they have their little things that they love. Okay. And usually they dress pretty well as well and have nice clothing items, or really value their clothing items, which would be kind of like small material things, right? And it's an earthy sign. So when we're dealing with material, we're dealing with the material plane, which is earthiness, pentacles, and the tarot. Anyways, the vision of a freer and more meaningful life was not pursued with care and forethought, of course, because Pluto isn't interested in preserving what is of value in the old order. It just wants to wipe the slate clean. This is what a great many people did during the 60s. Now the generation of people who were born then are now in their teens. Well, this was in the 1980s. Now they're in their, I believe they're in their late 50s, like mid to late 50s. I don't think it's a generalization to say that they are a very intense and anarchistic group in many ways. And it's a weird thing though, because my sister's a bit younger than me, and she's always whining about, when you guys, to like these parents in their 60s, when you guys were, 20, you could buy a house for $20,000, and, we're expected to never move out. And they don't really have much empathy or sympathy for that. So that's where I kind of notice, like, they don't go, yes, kids, inflation is insane. I mean, they try to help in their own ways, but they still act like we're kind of a lazy generation, even though inflation is about 20,000 times higher. Where I feel like the baby boomers, like my aunts and uncles that are a little older, I hope my mom doesn't watch this and think I'm dogging on her, but I feel like they're a little bit more like practical. Like, we need to set our kids up, kind of like certain collectives or cultures do. Like, we need to get them through college, and we need to Or I feel like the parents born in the 60s, some of them are that way, but some of them are much more like you're on your own. And if you don't make it, that's your own fault. And it's like they don't actually give you much sympathy. So there's like an authoritarian element there. So that could be the Saturn opposition to the uh, Pluto Uranus conjunction. Like Saturn does not have much sympathy for, there can be quite authoritarian. Like you just need to do what's right. And, if you don't succeed, it doesn't really matter, what the odds are. You didn't work hard enough, Anyways, so, all right, their music. Okay, I don't think it's a generalization to say that they are a very intense and anarchistic group in many ways. Their music reflects the inherent violence of Uranus Pluto. It's quite different from the rock music which emerged from the people born with Uranus in Gemini and trine to Neptune in Libra. Punk rock is violent and nihilistic. Now, I don't agree with this. I'm just reading it. I mean, we've had much music come since the 1980s, right? It's a bit different from Woodstock. There's quite a lot of violence coming from this group in Great Britain at the moment. They are embodying the same strange spirit that passed through those of us who are older during the 60s. I would say, though, like someone like Stanley Kubrick did start making films in the 60s, and I could see some of that in his work, And then we also have Quentin Tarantino, who I do believe was born in the 60s. I could be wrong. And you can see quite a bit of that in his work as well. So maybe. Gosh, there's a rock star that I think it was Kurt Cobain was actually born in the mid 60s as well. But okay, perhaps when they begin to reach midlife and the age of greatest external effectiveness, they will truly change the old order. So they're in midlife now, flash forward 40 years. I would expect the thrust of this to be in the areas of work, health, ecology, all the typical Virgo areas. And their Pluto's in Virgo, that's right, yeah. And it's sextile my Pluto in Scorpio, but then there's another planet I have that I think it's my Saturn in Sagittarius. Yeah, squares their Pluto in Virgo. So maybe that's where I get my little bias. My Saturn in Sagittarius is like, you guys are very rigid, even though Sagittarius can be dogmatic, but it's also very idealistic, So, anyways, some of this group have Saturn in opposition to the Uranus Pluto conjunction. Saturn has been moving through Virgo lately, and I think this may have some connection with the violence that is erupting. This is in the early 1980s. Because Saturn always tries to actualize things, it rules Capricorn, another very earthy material sign. Saturn has been triggering that conjunction. Who can blame them for being violent? That combination of planets is terribly explosive. See, and I don't necessarily think of them as a violent generation, but they may be a little bit like blasé about tearing down the old. They could be the generation that's like, oh, this building's been here for 200 years, but we want to build a super center. So, maybe there's a little of that going on. I don't know. Anyways, let me know what you think if you're born in that generation or if you have, parents or anyone who is. Okay, the combination of planets is terribly explosive, and a 15 or 16-year-old psyche cannot contain it as constructively as a 40-year-old. So maybe, my parents, they were able to like go cross state lines and drink when they were like 19 and stuff. So it wasn't like they were the perfect generation, but I don't know. I don't feel like they were that crazy, but who knows, maybe to the ones that came before them. And then we also have learned and replicated some of their behaviors as well. So maybe to me it's not that outrageous, but maybe what they were doing at that time in the 1980s was quite outrageous to the generations that came before them, or at least for being teenagers, maybe they were a little ahead. I'm not sure, I'm just speculating, but we only have about a page and a half left, so let's get through this. Audience. It would be very interesting to meet a cross-section of the young people born during the Uranus-Pluto conjunction who are the children of the hippie generation, just to see the difference in consciousness. Okay, so Uranus-Pluto, they are who are the children of the hippie generation. Oh, that would be like us, okay? Okay. If your parents were born in the 1960s, this would be you. It says it'd be very interesting to meet a cross-section of those young people. Well, flash forward to, the early 2000s, that's who they're speculating on, so. crossing the early 2000s teenagers with the teenagers in the 1980s is basically what this audience member is saying. They're like, it'd be interesting to look in the future. Well, 40 years later, we can now reflect on what they were thinking about us in the 1980s as speculative. So Liz says, I have met 2 or 3. That doesn't count as a statistic, but those 2 or 3 charts that I have done have suggested certain things to me. The parents all have Uranus in Gemini and Neptune in Libra, and often they are in trine. There is a typically airy idealism about this group. Even the people born with Saturn conjunct Uranus and Taurus have the conjunction in trine to Neptune. The vision of a new world is very strong, but it's a vision that comes out through ideas, music, attitudes about love and personal relationships, things that are much gentler, right? Libran. So their children are more cynical, just as the hippie generation rebelled against cynical parents. Here, the offspring are the cynical ones. The earthy sign in which the conjunction falls comes through very strongly. We usually imagine that the parents who are older and have experienced more are therefore more realistic and worldly. But here it seems to be reversed. So I guess she's talking about the parents of the children born in the 60s. So these would be the hippies in the 60s having the children. So the hippies are more nary-fairy and the children are more serious, probably with that Saturn opposition, I guess is what she's saying. I got a little lost there. These children are very bitter and very pragmatic. Perhaps they need to be. I don't really know. When major transits occur over one of these outer planet configurations, it's like a signal which mobilizes an entire generation. It's almost a sort of massive army, a group which has an undeclared purpose in terms of collective evolution and development. And when the natal configuration is triggered, then the army is sent into action. Obviously, these things occur in the unconscious, but I think it's this effect of transits later on over the natal configurations of outer planets which brings the meaning of the thing out into society. You might notice that all your friends of the same age group begin going through personal crisis at the same time. The group is like an organism and begins moving through important stages of development. Although if you see this individual by individual, you might not make the connection. I don't know, that's a little wordy. Of course, there are casualties then when these triggers occur. Some people can't meet the challenge or the pressure on the psyche becomes too great. Others strengthen and become very creative. I am convinced that generations have a meaning and a purpose, just as an individual has a meaning and purpose for being alive. Although it's perhaps impossible to ever really know fully in a rational way what the meanings might be. I mentioned the group born with Uranus in opposition to Neptune in the first decades of the century. Perhaps these people were meant in some way to be a sacrificial group. They certainly suffered a great many things which we would very likely never suffer, as though they cleaned something out of the collective for those of us who came later. That is perhaps a rather mystical way of looking at it. But I sometimes have the feeling that these people are kind of bridge over which their children and grandchildren have walked, right? Like they cleared out some generational curses for us. Some of them are very sorry for themselves and therefore antagonistic towards younger people who do not have to suffer what they suffered. But many others I have met seem to have an understanding of this contribution to the next generation through sacrifice and taking on of a burden. There's a synchronicity between outer worldly events and the individuals who grew up through those events. I would call that more of a correlation, but the people produce the events and are also the recipients of them. In some way, they are the same thing. Perhaps people who are not bound by strong outer planet configurations are in some way freer. I'm sure that to have Uranus conjunct Pluto in your birth chart means that you are driven towards some collective end, and your personal life is going to be affected by that in a way which other people are not. Some generations are terribly strongly marked and obviously stand for something, while others are more blurred and are simply people moving through life. If you are tied by the outer planets, then you as an individual are tied to the collective in some unusual way. And if this is so, then I suspect it's very wise to get some sense of what that might mean. Your fate is bound up with the collective, and it may become very difficult to pursue a life of benign, placid continuity, either because you yourself suffer from an intense inner restlessness, or because the world rather nastily intrudes upon you. But in the end, the inner and the outer correspond, as above, so below, as within, so without. And we all meet the outer planets in one place or the other, if not both. So this concludes, good morning. Good morning, ER. This concludes lecture 3, and we have 7 lectures to get through. Then there is a chapter on the age of Aquarius, the age of Pisces. She says we'll go over birth charts a bit, but I feel like we've already done that quite a bit in the lectures. So again, we've gone over the birth charts of Hitler, Karl Marx, Carl Jung, Freud, and Nikolai Lenin. And in lecture 4, we're going to be getting into orbs, I think is what it looks like. So if you want to check out lecture 4, I'll start it most likely Monday, but like and subscribe so you can get the notification when I come on live. I try to sometimes give a heads up of about 30 minutes to an hour that I will be coming on, but I can't really schedule it out much further than that. So most likely my Fridays go by really quick, and then my weekends get tied up with family and everything, but I will be back on Monday, Tuesday at the latest to start lecture 4, so I'm pretty excited about that. If you want me to go over your birth chart, I do a very in-depth reading. I go over each house, each planet, each aspect, what it means. It's a few hours long. You can check that package out at rotation411.com. I also have Zoom packages and stuff if you want to get on live and ask me something, on the fly. But anyways, I'm sending you all lots of love, blessings, and light as always. I'm going to check out. Thank you, Mike Jones, for joining us. Thank you, Lucky. Thank you, everyone that was here. And if you are single and looking, I'm not single, but I am, you can match against me. It's divinetimingdatabase.org. You can get there quickly by going to moonmatch.love. All you do is you can just do the entry there and use the 50% off coupon for the month of December 2024. If you're watching this after that for some reason, you can use my affiliate coupon. It's rotation 411 and get 10% off. But if you just do the entry package, you can run the auto search and see if you have any matches in there. Most of you should have a match by now. And again, if you are already dating online and you've just been dating and dating, you're going to have much better odds in the database because you're going to meet somebody who you have astrological compatibility with. Right now, I believe you can only run in your country. So, if you're in the United States, you can look in the United States. You can actually look to each continent, but it's gonna be, getting better and better as time goes on. But anyways, definitely check it out. You can definitely find someone in your country at the very least that you are a great astrological match with. And if you're not single, do be sure to spread the word. There's a really good affiliate program on there. I think you get like a dollar back per entry. So if you have any kind of following yourself and get 1,000 people in there, that's $1,000 extra in your pocket for Christmas. So definitely go, if you're not going to enter the database yourself, definitely enter the affiliate program. All right. I'm sending you all lots of love and light. Again, bye-bye.